We're very fortunate to have with us this morning Secretary of Finance from the Philippines, Cesar Purisima. I think who will allow me to call him a buddy. A long time ago, we were trade ministers together, and I still remember how in 2005, over corruption issues in the previous administration, he joined others in resigning from the cabinet, a group called the Hired 10. When he got back into office, my heart lifted. In the last 5 years, the Philippines has done remarkably well. 2010, Noy took over, growth rate 7.6, dipped to 3.1 the year after, then up again 7 point something or 6.8, 7 point something, and last year 6 plus, making the Philippines the fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia. Big question is what follows? If you have another administration just as good or almost just as good, the Philippines will be grooved in, on track, in a great transformation. Population of some 100 million people, whose talent we see all over the world, but whose talent, unfortunately, back in the Philippines, sometimes gets reduced. And it's all a question of the quality of governance. Cesar, you have been a key figure in Noy's cabinet. You have done so much, sometimes against advice from others that you were being too strict, too severe. But by maintaining a steady course, you have done well for your people and your country. Secretary Purisima will speak for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then open the session to your questions. Thank you. Secretary, please.
Thank you, George, for those kind words. Ever since I've met George, I've been listening to him. So this is my first time to be able to talk before George, so the pressure is on. But George is one of the smartest people I've met. Is able to look at issues and give historical perspective as easily as anyone. Events like this have become ever more important as we seek to make sense of the challenges being presented to us in the world today. Let me name three. First, the uncertain growth and the lack of aggregate demand. In the first summit in 2012, Prime Minister Lee identified economic problems facing the US and Europe as critical risk. 4 years on, Europe is still flirting with episodes of crisis, and the United States is still trying to find a clear way forward. Now we have to add to the mix the so-called slowdown of China and the flight of capital from emerging markets. This has led to the uncertainty of growth prospects for the global economy and the volatility in the capital markets, the threat of a vicious cycle rearing its ugly head. The global demand model is a bit skewed when the prosperity of 3/4 of the world is dependent on the 1/4. In an increasingly connected world, volatility spreads quickly. In recent weeks, we have seen volatility in markets, and this has created yet new questions that still has to be answered. Second, climate change. Climate change is real. We started 2015 with the eastern seaboard of the US facing its coldest winter ever. Yet globally, 2015 is shaping up to become the warmest year with 6 out of 8 months so far hitting high notes and setting new records. In the Philippines, 3 of our deadliest typhoons happened in the last 4 years. Globally, for the first time, losses from natural disasters has exceeded $100 billion in 3 consecutive years. Asia Pacific bears the brunt of this with an estimated $71.3 billion in annual losses. Speaking at the start of this month in Alaska, President Obama commented that few things have a negative impact on our economy as climate change. And yet we have devoted more attention to things other than climate change. Third, geopolitical risk. In 2012, Prime Minister Lee identified this as risk. The rising nationalism in different places for different reasons, and the shift in strategic balance as China becomes stronger. Now we have to add Russia's adventurism, the emergence of groups such as ISIS, and the resulting migrant situation. During the Milken Institute Asia Summit yesterday, the panel on global risk focused on the shifts in geopolitical risk and how the global economy will be deeply affected by these shifts. Someone whose name I unfortunately cannot recall said it best, and I paraphrase. Even in geopolitics, we are all price takers, like in markets. We are only able to piece together the consequences of these events later on, prompting our response to be more reactive rather than proactive. These three external challenges I mentioned, plus the domestic socio-political issues, are among the challenges leaders of countries and even companies have to contend with. The challenges that shape the course of nations become increasingly complex, such is simply the nature of the global context we confront today. While the Philippines is not immune to the impact of these global challenges, we have thankfully been able to maneuver our economy to safe harbors through the current upheaval. Our average growth of 6% from 2010 to 2014 is the highest 5-year growth we've had since the 70s, allowing us to shed the label sick man of Asia and to replace it with a bright spot in Asia. Do allow me to share with you our experience in confronting our unique set of challenges. The key to our story are 1, better governance, 2, strong macroeconomic fundamentals, 3, policy reform, and finally, partnership with our people, which I call the ultimate PPP. First, President Aquino instituted good governance. The Philippines has had a bad reputation in this regard. Yet in 2010, something changed. President Aquino took office with a large mandate and a platform for reform. Yes, there was skepticism from the international community at first, but the administration's actions spoke louder than words. The impossible started to happen. We enforced our laws, we involved the people in filing complaints against corrupt officials, and we filed cases against them. We championed radical reforms in our budget process, opening it up to all to see using technology. We practiced zero-based budgeting, performance-informed budgeting, grassroots participatory budgeting, as well as earning accolades from the global stage in the use of technology in this regard. The reforming seal of the Aquino administration has allowed us to make progress through greater transparency, improved governance of financial institutions, fiscal responsibility, creating fiscal space. Standing here in Singapore, it's a great view from the summit indeed, where we see this great country that was built on the foundation of anti-corruption and meritocracy when it was founded or when it gained independence 50 years ago. As former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew once said, in the third world, a clean, efficient, rational, and predictable government is a competitive advantage. Second, strong macroeconomic fundamentals. We firmly focus on strengthening our macroeconomic fundamentals. As hot money look for new homes in the East, we manage our fiscal position prudently. We have external strength, fiscal health, and adequately low inflation. We have minimized our risk and exposure through orchestrating sustained reductions in our external debt to GDP ratio, from 36.9% of GDP in 2009 to 26.1% in the first quarter of this year. Our general government debt decreased from 44.3% in 2009 to 36.4% in 2014. Since 2010, our external debt is all long-term, and our domestic debt maturity improved from 54% long-term to 83% long-term. Thus, our interest expense as a percent of revenues was 16.8% in 2014, down from 24.8% in 2009. We have sustained our foreign exchange reserves at above 10 months import cover since 2010. We've had 13 years of consecutive current account surplus. We have improved the quality and diversity of our investments and exports markets. For example, we are now the 4th largest shipbuilding country and the 2nd largest in the business outsourcing space. Third, policy reform. We set out to institutionalize better governance by enacting policies and legislation to address our constraints to growth. We legislated the following: a reproductive health law, amendments to sin tax law, enhanced basic education to follow the global standard of K+12, state-owned enterprises governance law, allowing full entry of foreign banks, amendments to the cabotage law, and competition law, among others. All our policy reforms are focused on increasing the competitiveness of the Philippines. Last but not the least, we have established a firm partnership with our people, which is the ultimate public-private partnership. A strong mandate translates into political capital. The support of the people has allowed, President Aquino to challenge vested interests and enact reforms that benefit the majority instead of the few. These were battles that cost political capital. But the interesting thing is that President Aquino gained more political capital when he spent it on reforms. A good example was when he worked with Congress to impeach the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for unexplained wealth. As a result, President Aquino has enjoyed 5 years of positive ratings. Even his lowest ratings are still higher than the highest ratings of previous president. This has also translated to congressional support to enact key legislation mentioned above. President Aquino understood the power of creating virtuous cycle of confidence. Because both Filipinos and our neighbors, such as yourselves, has renewed confidence in our country, our credit ratings improve, resulting in cheaper financing. Our people now have the confidence to buy cars, apartments, and other investments for long term, driving economic growth. In fact, car sales are up 27% this year. Likewise, companies in the Philippines now risk 5 to 10-year corporate plans when the norm used to be planning around 1 to 3 years. In the capital markets, our best corporates are now investment grade, and they have increasingly been borrowing for longer maturity as well. Externally, if you look at foreign direct investment, flows into the Philippines increased by 51% from the previous decade. Net FDIs was one of the highest in the last 3 years, up 66% in 2014. Our public investment in infrastructure has increased from 2% of GDP to 5%. Our public-private partnership is a reminder of the renewed confidence in the country. We have awarded 10 projects worth $4.2 billion and have over 50 projects in the pipeline, including highways, rail, and ports needed to sustain our economic growth under a PPP program. Mark Johnston, chairman of the Asia-Pacific Infrastructure Partnership, noted earlier this year that the Philippines has made better and faster progress in PPP than many other economies. But we still have a long way if we want to address our ultimate goal of alleviating poverty and improving the lives of our people. We need to continue our growth for the next 10 to 15 years and even longer. To do this, we must continue to do the following: continue our investments in infrastructure, continue our investments in our people, and continue to reform our policies. First, in infrastructure. To meet the needs of our growing country and to ensure that the country is able to integrate with the global supply chain, we must continue spending at least 5% of GDP in the years to come. Continuing a credible PPP program will also strengthen the country's ability to mobilize public and private resources for infrastructure. Quality infrastructure is vital to our competitiveness. Our success in the BPO industry would not have been possible without world-class telecoms infrastructure. I still remember the speech of former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew in 1992 when he quipped that the joke in the Philippines is that 98% of the population is waiting for a telephone line and the other 2% for a dial tone. I am not sure whether then President Ramos liberalized our telecom industry in reaction to former PM LKY's comments. But we opened up the sector to competition soon after. This is also an example where technology allows latecomers to leapfrog because we jumped to mobile telephony. Second, investing in our people. We were able to invest in a skilled, trained, and healthy community. After all, economies are about people. The Philippines just entered a demographic sweet spot, and we are expected to hit a middle income inflection point where GDP per capita could reach $6,000. To capitalize on these two sweet spots, we strengthened a priority program using conditional cash transfers to improve the health, nutrition, and education of children. We increased the budget for this program by more than 6 times since the President took office. Since 2010, we doubled our education budget, we tripled our health budget, we expanded our national insurance health coverage to 88%, up from only 51% in 2010. The only way we will be able to realize our demographic dividend is through an educated and healthy population. After all, education, especially in technology, is a great equalizer. Reforming policy. We need to continue to institutionalize good governance in all branches of governments. Government service must draw the best and the brightest, which can only be done through a civil service reform. Officials must be paid based on performance. We must continue to open up our economy and establish a true meritocracy in government. Good governance, after all, is good economics. Such reforms can be undertaken by a single country looking to confront its internal challenges. However, individual nations can only do so much to combat the externalities and complexities we face today. Like banks merging to face larger threats, we need to band together in order to confront the challenges of our new normal. ASEAN represents a tremendous opportunity for the Southeast Asian countries. Taken as one, our middle class of 190 million persons is already larger than that of the United States at 180 million. By 2020, according to Nielsen Research, the ASEAN middle class will be larger than that of Brazil, US, France, Germany, and the UK combined. This is precisely why ASEAN lends us the leverage we need to come out on top side of this wave of challenges. Adapting to change is easier to attain together. I believe we can do more than just the sum of our individual strengths as a nation. Paraphrasing a popular misquote from Charles Darwin, it is not the strongest of the countries or the economies that survive, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that most adapts to change. ASEAN's promise has me convinced that the game of societal evolution need not be zero-sum. Allow me to give you at least 3 reasons why. First, ASEAN can look inward to combat uncertain growth and the lack of aggregate demand. If we could increase intra-ASEAN trade from 24% to 40%, the incremental impact on the ASEAN economy could translate to as much as $2.5 trillion annually, especially if we are able to change the nature of the trade from intermediate goods to final consumption products. McKinsey estimates that the infrastructure requirement and real estate investment requirement of the region at $7 trillion from 2014 to 2030. Financing this need can also be another engine for growth. Our financial sector must deepen and integrate to withstand global stresses and to satisfy the increasing demands for long-term risk-sharing capital. Capital markets have a big role in increasing productivity, diversifying sources of finances, and mitigating capital flow volatility. We must complement our reliance on the US, Europe, and Japan by looking to our neighbors, including India and China. Odds come out more in our favor when we bet on ourselves. Second, ASEAN can form a unique voice in building multilateral cooperation on climate change. We recognize the urgency of coming up with solutions to climate change by responding as one region through one ASEAN, one response, which enables us to recover faster and at the same time lowers economic cost by shortening recovery time. We can also look at disaster risk mitigation as a region. The Philippines is, for example, looking at a program loan from the World Bank that shall help the government better manage fiscal risk if and when severe natural disaster hits the country. This pioneering product will write off a portion of our loan in case such an event happens. This will give us the ability to protect our fiscal future, not only rely on the course of Mother Nature. Together, ASEAN could consider a Chiang Mai-like initiative where we can create a pool of funds to be used as collective insurance for the region. Third, ASEAN is the natural forum to act as a stabilizing voice in a region with increasing tensions as geopolitical shifts occur. Following the ASEAN way to reach consensus and not compromise has allowed the region to build trust. It has also shown the feasibility of diverse countries working together to achieve common goals. While ASEAN now has become more synonymous to economic cooperation and integration, its original purpose in 1967 was to safeguard the peace and stability of the region as the world then was faced with ideologically driven global conflict. We must rekindle our role in this way. Lest I be misinterpreted, I am not referring to a military alliance. I am referring to cooperation amongst ASEAN in resolving issues. A good example was the role of Malaysia in helping the Philippines resolve its long dispute in the southern Philippines by acting as facilitator. Likewise, ASEAN acts as a moderating voice for those with disputes in the South China Sea. The challenges for ASEAN are not surmountable so long as all members are prepared to accept and embrace change. Just as the Philippines sets itself on a course to change the old ways, so too can ASEAN follow that path of renewal and change. While change is inevitable, adaptability is not. As the external forces shake the world's foundation, we are measured by how readily we are willing to adapt and to succeed in each new normal. Perhaps the global community and ASEAN specifically must also find the fundamental principle that will carry us forward to the next century. It must, moreover, make adaptability to change the central character of our societies today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cesar, for a short but very interesting presentation about the Philippines and ASEAN. May I invite questions from the floor, please?
My name is Peter de Kulf, Unilever. We enjoyed, as Minister knows, a fantastic ride in the Philippines. Many people, however, are still working in the agricultural sector, which is very unproductive, or whether it's still a huge boost is possible. In your speech, you didn't talk about what you're going to do to lift rural Philippines. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Yes, 30% of our people are in this sector, and they only produce 12% of our GDP. So clearly, the bulk of poverty is in this sector. We need to do a lot of things. One, we need structural reform. Land reform, which is about to end, must be coupled with financial access reform. We need to be able to give them access to cheaper costs of financing and access to markets. The other thing is we need more infrastructure investments in the area. For example, of our rice production, we lose about 35% from poor storage and drying facilities. Third, we need to be able to better direct production to those that the market needs. There are many programs ongoing right now, but there's still a lot of work to be done. In fact, all the candidates that are running for the 2016 elections have that as one of their priorities in their economic program.
Thank you. Next question, please. You know, Secretary Purisima, you gave a wonderful account of how much better the macroeconomic indicators of the Philippines are. And you are certainly in a virtuous circle now. But looking ahead, elections are coming. Can you give us a sense of the positions taken by the various candidates in the field, and whether there are particular worries that you have?
Well, for me, there are two important things that need to happen in the elections. First, the elections must be credible. And the President has done a lot in that regard by appointing a chair of the Commission on Elections that is considered to be nonpartisan and capable. Secondly, the winner must have a substantial mandate, similar to what President Aquino did, because there's still a lot of work to be done. And the next leader must have the political capital to be able to impose these reforms. I guess we're fortunate that Filipinos are savvy with social media, and they will have a good chance to be able to see through all three of the declared candidates so far. And I am confident that the Filipinos who aligned their personal interests with the interests of government, with the growth that they've experienced the past 5 years, and with the increased economic freedom that they have, will be making the right choices.
Ambassador Chan?
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Chan Heng Chi, Singapore. I'm chairman of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities, and my question is on cities. The population of the Philippines is today about 100 million, and I think Metro Manila is about 40 million or more.
It's about 12 million, and Mega
larger-
Metro Manila is about probably 20.
Can you tell us if there are plans in the Philippines to build second-tier and third-tier cities? Because this is in China, and I think you find in India, other cities are being developed too. The agglomeration in Manila is really quite challenging.
Yes, in fact, that's one of the key goals that President Aquino set forth when he came to office. And we've been approaching it several ways. First, the budget for infrastructure, which used to be centered around the Metro Manila region, has been better balanced across the whole country. Secondly, the incentives that we give companies are now biased towards those that set up outside Metro Manila. Third, we have been strengthening local government units with incentive programs so that they are better able to cater to the needs of businesses as they go into that. Now, for example, a good example of what has happened in the country is the business process outsourcing industry. During the first 5 years, it was centered around Metro Manila. And then it went to second wave cities. Now we're on the third wave cities, covering over, I think, 13 or 14 cities across the country. So this process is ongoing, but will take time.
Next question, please. Yes, please.
Mike Milken, Milken Institute. Thank you for joining us earlier this week. If we were to look at the audience here today and ask what multinationals or what industries from outside the Philippines that you would be most interested in attracting, whether it's financial, whether it's healthcare, what would the 2 or 3 be today?
I was asked about agriculture earlier. I don't know whether there's a major agriculture company here. We need large-scale agriculture to help us with our agricultural issues. We have several initiatives already in that regard right now. For example, Nestle is helping us develop our coffee industry. We used to import 100% of our coffee. I think we're down to 80% of that, and our goal is to continue using that as a product to enhance the incomes of farmers. A local company, Jollibee, used to import all its onions. Now I understand they get their supply through working with farmers 100% from the Philippines. Unilever is also doing something, I think, in the coconut and palm oil area. So we need partners in the agricultural space. We will need partners in infrastructure. Singapore is the best evidence of world-class infrastructure. And the Philippines is an archipelago of over 7,100 islands. We not only need to be connected with the rest of the world, we need to be connected within. So there is a massive need for infrastructure investment in the country across the field, from power, mass transit, agriculture, social infrastructure. All of these are needed. Finally, we will need partners in technology. The world right now is increasingly being empowered by technology. And for a country like us that somehow fell behind, the opportunity really is to be able to leapfrog using new models, new technologies. And the good thing is the world is becoming very connected in terms of knowledge. So we have young people now, getting into new ideas, new models, and this is the third thing that I'd like to see in the country.
Secretary Purisima, there are many Chinese friends in the audience. Can you tell us how you see Philippines' relations with China in the coming years?
China is very important to all of us. And I think the good thing in today's globalized world is that the relationship among countries have many dimensions. In the case of the Philippines and China, our trade relationship is robust and in fact is one of our fastest growing sectors. Our tourism relationship continues to grow. Investment is growing, but there's still a lot of room for increase. We do have issues involving certain territorial rights. I think these issues are very difficult, but it cannot be made front and center of our relationship. I think the approach there would have to be to agree to disagree and put it on the side and move forward on the things that can benefit us. And there are many examples of how this has been done successfully. Taiwan and China, for example. I think there's still many issues that they haven't resolved, but they continue to develop their relationship. That's the relationship that I'd like to see. I think that's the relationship that we need with each other, because we cannot have instability in the South China Sea if we are to accomplish the potential of the region. Stability is a prerequisite.
In 2012, in January, I was walking on the beach on Negros Island with Jaime Ayala's father. And he reflected that since President Noynoy came to office, it has become fashionable to be honest in the Philippines again. And it's amazing how, when the president is well-centered and allows a good finance minister to do the right things, how quickly a country can recover and benefit millions of people. Secretary Purisima, thank you for being here today. Our heartiest congratulations to you for your outstanding work. And amidst all that, you've been able to produce 2 children, Gabriel and Elise Anatolia. And we wish you a fantastic home stretch and a great new phase after that. Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you.